Hi, I'm Steve Mace from Solwise, and what I'm going to do in this video is do a proper hands-on live configuration and setup of a managed Neutron Wi-Fi system from EnGenius. So if you've been watching my other videos, you should be aware of what the Neutron system is from EnGenius and what features and functions it gives you. And I've already gone through a video which actually gives a PowerPoint slide-by-slide presentation going through the setup procedures. But sometimes I think it's better to actually do something live, proper hands-on, because it gives people more of a sense that I'm not lying when I say it's super easy. It really is easy, and this is how quick and simple it is to configure it. So what I've done is I've gone down to our stockroom and I've just grabbed a random selection of Neutron compliant equipment. So as you're probably aware, at the core of it you need a controller management switch. So I grabbed this beast off the shelf, which I think is a 7928P. So this is a 24 port PoE controller switch. So I grabbed that off a shelf. We've also got one of the on-the-wall access points, which I'm a big fan of. What else did we get here? We got an EAP 1300. That's one of the new Wave 2 products from EnGenius. It's not strictly a Neutron product, but what they have done is they have put some limited functionality for Neutron management into this, so I thought it best to show you what that looks like as well. We've got one of these big thundering beast outdoor units. I don't actually know what this is. I think it's possibly an 860, so we've got that. Couple of basic dual band 11N access points. I think these are 310 models, and a sample 11AC product. This is, if rubbish eyes will pick it out, I think, yes, this is an EWS 360 AP. So what I'll do is I'll connect all these up to the switch and power it all up, and we'll get it all working, and then I'll do we'll flip over to a video actually going through the on-screen setup on my little trusty notebook. So just give me 30 seconds to set it all up, and we'll continue from there. Okay, so what I've done now is continuing this live setup. I've now actually powered up the EWS controller switch and connected that to the network. So at the moment I haven't connected all the access points to the switch because, as I've mentioned in my previous videos, I'm a big fan of let's get the switch operational before we start connecting and make things complicated with the access points. So the default address is 192.168.0.239. Now, obviously, as per my previous videos, I've said the one thing you have to do is make sure that your computer is on the right subnet to see the controller on its 0239 address. And I just happen to know that my computer is, because the 0 address is what we use in our building by default. If I wasn't using the 0 address range, I'd have to go along and actually change the setup of my PC. I won't go through that. If you don't know how to change the address of your PC, then there are plenty of online videos telling you how to do it. So 0239, and the default login is admin and password. Enter. Okay, so we come bang into the initial startup screen for the controller. And the first thing the observant people to notice is it's immediately saying there's an update available. However, you cannot apply the update straight away. As I've said in my previous videos, first job, you've got to get the IP settings right for the switch. Now, I know it says there's an update, so you're thinking, oh, it must have some sort of internet access, but believe me, if you proceed with this internet update, it'll all go belly up. It will just not work. First job, get the IP settings right for the switch. So, as I've also said in my previous videos, we've got two parts of this device. We've got the controller module, which is all of the stuff concerned with the Wi-Fi management, and we've got the switch side, which is to do with the switch management. So let's go straight to switch management. And we've got our IP settings, IPv4. So the default address 0239 is okay for our network, but the default gateway doesn't work. And for the DNS, I'm just going to put in the standard free DNS address. Click on apply. It's warning us that this is going to disconnect any access points because it's going to do a quick restart. So now we can come back to controller. So we've got the IP settings correct, ready to go. There are other settings that we could have played around with in that switch module, like the bandwidth and the QoS and PoE, power budgeting, and that sort of thing. For a quick, simple, basic setup, don't worry about that. Leave it all default. You can go back and play with that to your heart's content afterwards. So now we are going to go through the update procedure. So we click on that. And we don't have to do check for updates because it's automatically found us an update. So it's saying there's an update for this controller, which was released in November. So I'm going to click on update. It's warning us yet again, this is going to cause disruption. We continue. And what we're going to do now is go through the actual update process. So this does involve some waiting. Let's get some details, see if that tells us anything exciting. Oh, well, we started off. So we've got some progress. So it said we've got the update. Just need to click on the OK now to reboot. So it's now going to reboot on with the new firmware loaded, still on the address 0.239. Now it is quite slow rebooting these things. They do take a while. Oh, something's happening. So we're back up and ready to go, and now we can type in the username and password, which is admin password. Enter. So we're up and ready to go. So what we've done is, just to recap, we've gone straight into switch. We've set up the IP settings to suit the network, and then we've gone through the update procedure, the automatic update procedure, and that's now been applied, rebooted. You notice that we no longer have an update icon on the top right hand corner of the screen. So at this stage, what we're now ready to do is start connecting the access points. So what I would do at this stage is I'll just pause for a couple of minutes while I rush off and plug in the various access points. Okay, so that's all 6 access points now plugged in, and they're all now powering up. And what we can do is, under the device management, if we go to access points, we can see here as they are gradually being detected and added to the configuration or to the controller system. So at the moment, all it's doing is the controller is just detecting these access points on the network. It's not actually managing these access points, it's just detecting these access points. So I plugged in 6 access points, 2 310s, a 360, an EAP 1300, an EWS 5000, I think, on the wall, and I think that big chunky thing over there is an 860. Yes, there's the 860 found. So far 4 access points have been detected, 5 access points detected, and just wait for the last one. Dig, 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 dig. There's one of them that's slow booting up. Which one's slow booting up? Ah, it's the EAP 1300 is the slow one booting up by the looks of it. Ah, finally. So we now got the EAP 1300 in the list. So I say it's detected the access points, but they're not, at this stage they're not managed by the controller. So what we need to do is bring these access points into the management of this controller. So I'm going to click here to select them all, and I'm going to click on add. It's now coming up saying what I want to do about the IP settings. Well, I'm going to leave them on DHCP because that makes my life a lot easier. So I'm going to click on apply. So what it's doing now is it's bringing the access points it's found under the management of the controller, and instantly you notice that some have come up saying incompatible version. What that basically means is that as it's warning us here, some of these access points are actually on incompatible old firmware. Do I want to check for updates? Yes, I do. So now I'll just trot off and bingo, that's done it all automatically for us. So we've now got that icon you saw before. It's now saying there's 3 updates available, and it's automatically gone to the update list page and said, right, we've got updates for 3 of these products. What do you want to do? Well, I'm now going to click on update, and it's warning us yet again this will down some of the access points, etc. So what we'll do now is we'll go through the download and update process. Let's put some details on here. Download and update process for the firmware for these 3 access point products. So unfortunately there's another sat around waiting for a good 3 minutes while it actually does it all. Okay, so God, that's finished. I think those were Microsoft minutes. It said 3 minutes to do the 3 access points, and my feeling is I think that is actually 3 minutes per device, because I've been sat here for a good 10 minutes for it to actually do all those firmware updates. But now we can actually scroll down the list. Now it's finally got to 100%. We can scroll down the list and you can see they're all done as far as the firmware update is concerned. This final one is still resetting. So that's all the updates done, and now we can actually click on OK. Comes up the message all devices are up to date, and if we scroll back up, and now we can go to device management, access points. It's not coming up with any warnings about incompatible firmware version, and they're all online. We're just waiting for that final one to finish doing its reset. And so once that's finished doing the reset, we're then in a position to continue the configuration of the access points. And to that end, what I'll do then is I'll go show you how you actually create a group, so that you can do bulk management of the access points. And once we've got a group actually created, then we can go through all the basic setup and configuration to get the Wi-Fi network up and going in a basic form with some form of Wi-Fi security on it. Once we've done that, then we can actually go to the final stages of starting to play around with some of the advanced features, like I don't know, we've got the band steering that we can play with, and guest Wi-Fi networks, and we can also start looking at some of the monitoring tools like the topology views and the map layouts and that sort of thing. So we'll just wait for this to finish doing all of the updates for and applying the changes for the access points. So they're all now configured, updated, and on the latest firmware. So at this stage, all the access points are configured with the default settings stored in the controller. So there's no Wi-Fi security setup at this stage. There's no fancy advanced features like the band steering setup. There's no group setup or anything like that. You've just got a raw starting point now for the access points. So they've all been updated with the new firmware, and you'll notice that they've all got IP addresses via DHCP from our network. So now what I can do is start to go through further stages of the configuration, and the next stage is AP groups. Okay, so to create a group, we click on AP Groups, and we click on Add, and we give the group a name. I don't know, I don't give it some exciting name like Test Group, whatever. And normally you'd put in a description there like, I don't know, this may be the first floor of the remote annex or something, I don't know, that sort of thing. So then, what it's given here is a list of all the access points which have not at this stage have been assigned to a group. Now obviously that's all 6 because this is our first group. So what I'm going to do is just going to select some of these access points and add them to our group. So they're now added to the group. And the next thing I'm going to do is go straight down to the wireless radio settings and do the initial radio settings setup. So the first thing you'd want to do is change the country because we're not in Albania. Now, if you scroll down the list, you'll notice there are 3 saying United Kingdom. There's plain United Kingdom, there's band B, and band C. Hopefully if you've been paying attention to my videos, you're all fully aware that there are differences in the different 5 gig bands used by the UK. But just to recap, plain United Kingdom means essentially band A, which is a selection of 5 gig channels and RF output power only applicable to indoor use. Okay. Next we've got band B. Now band B is my preferred choice because this is a band with a very wide range of a very large number of channels and a much higher RF output power of 1 watt. So that's for indoor and outdoor devices, 1 watt, and that's license free. And finally we've got the band C, which is strictly for outdoor point-to-point licensed connections. So forget about band C. So as I say, we normally click on band B. And you noticed there was a slight hiccup there as it changed the choices here on the right hand side. So we've now got set up for UK band B. And next on my list of things to do is let's go through and look at the SSIDs for the 2 bands. So what we've got is 8 SSIDs per frequency band. So we've got 8 for the 2.4 and 8 for the 5. By default, only the first SSID in each band is enabled. But what we can do is I'll just go through some simple setup and configuration. So we'll go to the first SSID and I'm going to just give it an exciting name of SSID 1. That's all I'm going to worry about at the moment. I'm not going to worry about any other settings at this stage. And then I'm going to go straight down to security and I'm going to pick WPA2 PSK and I'm going to click on both and I'm going to put a password in, I don't know, test, how about test, yeah, test, got to be 8 characters, obviously in real world I suppose you'd probably put in something a little bit more secure than test. So what we've done is we're just going to call this SSID 1 and we're going to give it the WPA2 PSK password of test. Save. Alright, now let's go through and do exactly the same for the 5 gigs. So we're going to select the first SSID. I'm also going to call that SSID 1 because hey, nobody's never accuse me of being full of imagination. And what we're going to do now is yet again I'm going to set up security both and I'm going to put in test. Save. Okay, so at this stage what we've done is we've created our first group. We've called it test group. We've put the members into the group. We've gone through and the only thing we've changed in the radio settings is we've set the country. We haven't worried about anything else, just leave everything else as default. There's no point in playing around with anything else at this stage. And under the 2.4 and the 5 gig settings, I've just set up the first SSID with some security. So now we can click on apply. And what it's doing now is it's going through each of the access points in turn and applying those configuration changes to those access points. So this does take a while. Oh, that was quite quick actually. So click on OK. So it's saying, right, you've created a test group, you've got 3 access points in, and you've got a member list here. Obviously it only shows the first one, and that's it. So if I click on that, it actually expands that so we can see all the members of the list. And if I go to access points here, you notice those 3 access points that are part of that group, it now says they are part of a group called test group, and it's going through the process of applying the changes that we did in that group to those 3 access points members. So what can we do next? Okay, so what we've got at the stage now is you've got your basic Wi-Fi network. It's all up and running, obviously on those 3 access points. They are now part of your group. You set up the security on them and give them an SSID name. So at this stage, you've got a Wi-Fi network, which is good for basic operation. So what should we do now? Let's continue configuring this group and do some of the further configuration. So let's look at roaming, because people like roaming because they think it's very important that we must have roaming. So I'm going to go back to the group and I'm going to click on the little pencil icon to bring it up. So roaming, so that is an SSID function, and we can, by default, roaming is turned off, but if we go to the SSID, so we'll go to the 2.4 gig SSID that we've already enabled first of all, and we'll scroll down the settings, and you'll notice that fast roaming by default is disabled. So we'll just click on enable, and we save that. So that SSID is now set up to enable K and R roaming, and we'll do the same for the 5 gig as well. So that's now enabled with roaming as well. So what we've got now is we've now enabled both of our first SSIDs to support full K and R roaming. So what's next? Okay, let's have a look. Let's go back to the each SSID now, and we'll look at isolation. So, as you remember, going back to some of my previous videos, there are several different forms of isolation. The 2 most important ones are what we call client isolation and layer 2 isolation. So client isolation means that any 2 clients that are connected to the same access point can't see each other through that access point. All right, but that doesn't mean that clients can't see each other on different access points. Client isolation only affects clients on the same AP. Okay, so the next level of isolation was called L2, or layer 2 isolation. Now with layer 2 isolation, no client can see any client no matter where they are on the network. So what that means is if you've got clients on different access points, then they can't see each other on those different access points. So notice there was a jump there in the isolation. Client isolation, basic client isolation, means through the same access point. L2, layer 2 isolation, means through different access points. All right, so if you wanted to set up isolation, you just enable these 2 boxes. Now you've got to take care with these. The main problem you've got is if you enable layer 2 isolation, what that means is no client can see any other client on the network. Now, if one of those clients happens to be, for example, a network printer, then what you mean is now you can't see that network printer on the network. So going for full layer 2 isolation can be, in my opinion, a little bit unadvisable. Maybe client isolation, but layer 2 isolation, careful using that. And certainly, to be honest, if this is for a business application or something like that, I can't see why you'd want to go for any form of client or layer 2 isolation. That brings us down to this final one, which is called VLAN isolation. So that is the system whereby each of your SSIDs can be given a VLAN tag, and then you can program the rest of your network infrastructure, be it switches, routers, firewalls, anything else that's on your network, so that you can set them up so that only if you enable VLAN isolation on this, only other devices, you can only see other devices with the same VLAN. So if you were to enable this and put a VLAN tag 10 in, for example, then any clients who connect to this SSID, their traffic is automatically tagged with the VLAN tag 10. That means that they can only communicate or see through other devices, other infrastructure, other devices, client devices, be it network printers, be it mail servers, be it anything else that you've got on the network, which is also applicable and assign that VLAN tag 10. So, I'm personally not a big fan of VLAN tagging, because invariably when I start playing around with it, things start to go wrong. But I'm not alone with that. I think everybody I know, ever speak to, as soon as I start playing with VLAN isolation, things start to go wrong. There's a bit of a learning process when you start playing with VLANs. And the usual rule of thumb is make sure you've got that bent paperclip lying around so that you can keep on resetting your products, because the problem with VLAN isolation is if you don't get it right first of all, if it's not ready, if it's not working and instantly, then because you've set up VLAN isolation, you can't get back into it to change it, because it won't let you, because the purpose of isolation is to stop people seeing each other on different VLAN tags. So that's where the bent paperclip comes in, to keep on resetting the switch and that sort of thing. So I won't worry about the VLAN isolation at this stage, because it just makes it too bloody complicated. So anyway, that's isolation. So I'm not going to worry about setting any of that up at the moment, so won't worry about that. Now then, next thing is bandwidth and client limitations and traffic shaping. So, as per my previous videos, there are multiple different ways that you can do bandwidth shaping and client limiting. The first option is done through the LAN port of the switch. So if I go to switch, it's timing me out. That's very irritating because I've been waffling too much. Okay, log back in again, go to switch. Right, now if we go to QoS, we have this thing called bandwidth control. Now, bandwidth control is a tool whereby we can control the uplink and downlink data going or enabled to go through a specific LAN port on the switch. Now obviously this applies to EnGenius switches only. If you've got third-party switches, then go and read the manual about how to do bandwidth control on those. I've no idea. So this enables you to limit the actual bandwidth going in and out of a specific LAN port. So if we, for example, had an access point connected to LAN port number 1, then by enabling this feature and putting sensible values in, we can control the overall bandwidth permitted to go in and out of that access point. So if that access point has 2 SSIDs enabled, what you mean is the aggregate data permitted to go through those 2 SSIDs added together. All right. So that's basic bandwidth control for the access point as a whole, which is done through the actual switch bandwidth control settings. Now the next thing is to look at client limiting. So we're going to go back to access point groups. Access point groups. And I'm going to click on that pencil again. And we're going to look at... Okay. Under the wireless radio settings, there was this box here called client limits. Now that basically limits the number of clients that can connect to that particular interface on the access point. And it obviously splits it down between 2.4, 5 gig normal 11M, and 11AC, obviously for 11AC compliant devices. The default is 127. Which is the maximum that you can set, or you can put in 0, which means no limit. To be honest, people don't usually play around with these. If you've got the correct number of access points to cover the area, then doing client limitation this way isn't really necessary. But we could, if we wanted, just set it to 50 on there, 50 on there. And we'll cope with 50 on the 11AC. Just as an example. Okay. Next, I'm going to show you the traffic shaping. Now, what traffic shaping means is controlling the bandwidth per SSID or per user. All right. And these are SSID functions, so it's under the SSID config. So if I look at the SSID config for the first of the 2.4, and there it is, on the initial start of the screen we have traffic shaping, and we can enable it or disable it, and we can either have it for the SSID as a whole, or for each individual user on that SSID. Okay, you understand the distinction. If we set this to, well, let's see what on the default, 100 meg. If we have 10 users connected, or 5 users connected, or 1 user connected, altogether they can only download or upload 100 megs worth of performance. Now, so if there's 2 clients, and let's say they're both hammering hell out of it, then you could roughly assume that they can only do 50 megs worth of streaming at any one time. 50 megabits per second. On the other hand, if we click in per user, those same 2 users can each do 100 megabits per second. So that's quite simple, really. That's traffic shaping. I should disable that. I'm not really interested in traffic shaping. So I'm going to cancel that. So that's the 2.4, and you've got exactly the same setting for the 5 gig. There it is, come straight up. You've got traffic shaping for the 5 gig SSID as well. Okay, right. So, I just noticed actually I hadn't forgot to enable the roaming for the 5 gig. Let's just do that. So, enable roaming for the 5 gig. And let me just remind myself, did I do it with the 2.4? I can't remember. Traffic shading, blah, 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 blah. No, and I haven't enabled the roaming for the 2.4 either. Don't know how I missed that. That was my first tick box to do that one. So, what's next on my list? LED control. That's an advanced settings. So, people do complain, or people have complained in the past, about the flickering LEDs on the access points. My feeling is if they're in a business environment, it doesn't really matter as far as I'm concerned. And if you turn the lights down, it can look quite pretty. But people do occasionally want to turn off the LEDs. And if we go into advanced settings, LED control, we've got full control of all of the LEDs on the actual access point. So we can turn on and off the power, the LAN, the 2.4 and the 5 gig radio. All those individually turn off. Which is, so that's that. Let's just click on apply. Because that's all the thing I want to do in the group at this stage. I want to, no, I'll tell you what I'll do. Well, let's just go show you the band steering first of all while we're on this screen. So beneath the LED control, we've got this band steering thing. Just to recap, band steering is a system whereby if you've got dual band access points and you've got dual band clients, if a client tries to connect at 2.4, then you can instruct the access point to try and coerce or force that client onto the 5 gig band. The reason being is 2.4 is very congested, there's not very much channel space, so it's better to move the clients over to the 5 gig where there's a lot more channel space and a lot more capability for a higher count of clients. So under band steering, we've got prefer 5 gig. That means try and coerce them onto 5 gig, but don't get too stroppy if they don't do it. Force 5 gig, which means they will be forced onto 5 gig whether they like it or not. And you've got band balance, which actually tries to equalize the clients. And if I connect band balance, you'll notice it says the percentage of clients on the 5 gig radio. The default is 75%, so 75% of all connected clients will be coerced onto the 5 gig band. However, there's also another factor here that says only do this if the actual signal you're getting from the client on the 5 gig is no worse than -75, because there's no point in kicking the client onto the 5 gig band if you're getting a crap signal from it on 5 gig. So that's band steering. I'll leave that enabled, and now I shall change the changes for the group. So we've done those changes, and now those changes are actually being applied to those access points which form part of that group. And if we go look at device management access points, yet again there's those 3 access points which are part of the test group which are actually having those changes, those configuration changes applied to them. So what next shall we talk about? So let's talk about the background scanning option. Now that's under wireless services. So to recap, background scanning is the feature whereby the access points can regularly poll the RF neighborhood that's going through all of the channels, both on the 2.4 and or 5 gig. And what it's doing is it's scanning the channels to ensure that the access points in question are forming part of the management of this device. The access points are all operating on the optimum channels to minimize interference between the access points. Now, what that means is that you can have a whole group of access points, all the access points on the controller, and each of them can be on different channels depending upon which gives the minimum interference detected between the access points. Now, one of the things key things to bear in mind there is that does not affect anything like roaming. Okay, roaming does not care what channel the various access points are on. So it doesn't matter whether it's just unassisted roaming or whether it's roaming using 802.11k, 802.11r. The ability of a client to roam between the access points does not matter as far as the channel of the access points is concerned. In order for a client to roam between access points, the important things are the SSID and the security. Okay? As long as they're the same SSID and the same security, then roaming will be permitted. The channel of the access points doesn't matter. So we can, for example, tick that and tick that. So what that means is that every 30 seconds on the 2.4 and the 5 gig, each access point will just have a quick look-see around the environment to see how the channel interference is going with other access points. All right, and at the end of its scanning process, if required, it will actually dynamically change the channel it's working on. Now, it can dynamically change the channel and still not affect those clients that are connected, because that's covered by another protocol, and every single time I come to this stage of the video, I forget what that protocol's called. I think it's called 802.11H. I'm pretty sure it's 802.11H. So 802.11H protocol kicks in, which basically means that if an access point's about to change channel, it can go to the client and say, "Hi, I'm just about to change channel. Please take actions accordingly." So the client will change channel accordingly as well. So you don't have to worry about the different access points being on different channels or them randomly changing channels. That's all catered for. Final thing on here on this background scanning thing is the auto TX power. So as well as changing the channels, what it can also do, or the access point can also do, is automatically adjust its transmit power. Now that's not enabled by default, and the reason is because it's not really very advisable, certainly not in normal operational running of your network. And the reason is because if a client is connected to an access point and all of a sudden, let's say the access point halves its output power, that could leave a situation where that client can no longer stay connected, and it may break the connection for the client. So auto power adjustment dynamically with a system running with clients connected is not necessarily a good idea. What I normally tell people is if you're putting in a system, enable the auto power for, I don't know, 24 hours or something like that. Give time for the access points to sort out what the best power is for them to work at. At the end of that 24-hour period, then untick the auto TX power. So you can leave this background scanning going for the channel operation, but don't sit there automatically changing the RF power because it can create issues. Now, the other thing that I probably should have drawn your attention to is that these functions, auto channel, auto power, will only happen if you've actually allowed the access points to do auto channel and auto power. So I'll just apply that and I'll show you what I mean. Right, that's in, if I go back to that group measurement, group configuration I did, and I go to radio settings. Here we go, radio settings. So the key thing I've got on here is auto channel and auto power. So if these are set to auto, that means that the system can automatically dynamically change the channels that the access points are on and the transmit power. The alternative obviously is you could actually fix the actual channel and you could fix the transmit power, but that means then you could the system will no longer automatically do it for you. So let's go back to access points. We know where we stand. Right, so those configurations have now all been applied. Okay, so let's go through some of the various monitoring tools that we've got in the Neutron system. So let's go look at, first thing we'll always go look at the topology view. So under visualization, if I click on topology view, let's scroll down because this is a bit big. Right, a topology view is a virtual layout of the network as a whole. Now, obviously what we've got here is an extremely boring network. All I've got is my aforementioned 7928p switch, and I've got all the access points plugged into it. The access points, I haven't bothered changing the name. I can scroll over each access point and it tells you information about it. So for example, it's saying that this one tells you what the channels it's operating it is and what group it has part of. Topology has been changed. What that means is that we haven't at this stage saved this topology. Look at the 860 model, similar sort of story, but notice there's no group membership mentioned. That one, yet again, we've got a group mentioned. That one is part of a group, and the final two are not part of a group. So at the moment, a very boring topology. Obviously, if there was a more sophisticated network with additional switches, then you'd see additional switches put in here and further switches and further access points branching off those switches. So a quite boring topology to show you, I'm afraid, but you get the idea. Now let's go through this. Let's look at something slightly more exciting. So map view. Now map view is really intended as a visual aid for any external access points you've got. So this links to Google. And by default, it comes up to some place in, I think this is Singapore. And look, you can see there's a tyre shop, there's a Toyota dealership. Isn't it amazing looking at these places to see what it's like in foreign climes? And it's got the Taiwanese Love Rabbit Association. Wow, I wonder what that is. And look, they've even got a CPC there as well. Wow. Anyway, not interested in that. So let's bring it a bit closer to home. So let's type in Hull. And we'll pick just Hull UK. Let's go back a bit quicker this time because I'll zoom out a bit more. I'll zoom out even more, make it even quicker. So where are we? Where are we? Where are we? Where are we? Oh, there's Sainsbury's. I can always recognise Sainsbury's. Click, click. There's Solwise. Click. Click, 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 click. And we'll zoom in a bit more. Alright, so about where we started from, we'll go down to the AP list. And what I'll do is I'll pick the 860, which is an outdoor access point. And I'll put that on the front of their building. Once you've placed your access points, what you can do now is you can do save map. So that map's now actually saved, and when we come back into map view, it'll go straight to this location and show us the access points that we've placed on it. It's more just a visual indication tool. It doesn't really necessarily tell you very much. Right. Let's look at floor views. So this is so map view is for outdoor access points. Floor view is for indoor stuff. So floor view allows us to upload a series of floor plan maps and plans, and on each plan we can actually place our access points. So if I go, obviously first time we come into it, I have to go to upload floor plan because we haven't got any floor plans loaded, and I need to select a suitable floor plan image. So I'm going to click on add, browse, and it so happens I've got one on the system already. So click on, so I picked a JPEG, we'll just call this, I don't know, floor, don't really matter, don't care. Click on apply. That's now loaded into the system. So what this is doing is actually taking that JPEG and actually storing it in the memory of the controller. So it's there now whenever we want to go back to it. So there is our floor plan. Obviously we can have multiple floor plans. And what I'll do is I'll go to edit, no, not the edit, idiot. Go back to floor plan view. And there it is showing the floor plan. So this is the one that we uploaded. And this is not our building, by the way. You know, it's not this grand, having all of these offices and conference centres and places for lunch and that sort of thing. Believe me, this is not Solwise. Okay, so we've got our floor plan up. What we can do now is, obviously, if we get other floor plans, we can select other floor plans. We've only got one loaded, so we're going to show this one. And yet again, we can go to AP list. 860 we've got placed as outdoor, but we'll pick up a couple of access points. We'll pick up that one and pick up that one, and we shall place them on the map. And what we can do now is, if we go to settings, I can tell it to show us the AP information for those access points. So as you see, I picked the 2, 3, 10 units, which are both part of the test group. And also you notice that each of them is on a different channel. So it's automatically sorted out a different channel for the two devices. That was going back to, remember that automatic channel, that background scanning thing I showed a little while ago. So here you can actually see that it's actually operated. Now, obviously, it's operating because the access points are literally on this desk here, no more than about 18 inches apart. So, next thing, I'm cringing showing this because I'm not a big fan of this sort of feature, but if I click on RF coverage, what it does is it draws an extremely fictitious heat map coverage map of the Wi-Fi onto the map. The problem is it's irrelevant. It may look pretty, but it doesn't actually tell you anything at all. Anyway, what can I say? We can play around with things like the offset for it, the signal strength, and what we consider to be a weak signal that a client can cope with, or a stronger signal. We can do all this sort of thing. And also we've got a scaling tool, because these distances this RF can go are immaterial if the system doesn't actually know what the scale is on this map. So to do that, we click on scaling tool and we draw a distance. So let's draw that, and let's put a guesstimate distance in for that. Let's assume it's probably about 3 meters per office. Let's say 3 meters. Oh, sorry, that'd be 6 meters, wouldn't it? Click on apply. So that's allowed it to actually do a more intelligent drawing for how far the RF is going. But the reason why I'm not a big fan of this, and I think it's a little bit useless, looks pretty but that's about it, is it doesn't take into account of anything like walls. You'll notice that we've got these access points placed in these corridors, and the RF coverage is not showing any degradation as it's going through the various walls of the offices. So it's a bit useless. It looks pretty, but in my opinion it doesn't really give any meaningful results. I mean, hey, we don't know, this might be a solid concrete wall separating this office here from the hallway, in which case you might find there's no Wi-Fi in that building, in that room at all. So looks pretty, doesn't necessarily tell you very much. However, EnGenius have actually redeemed themselves, and if you go to the EnGenius Singapore website, they've now got an extremely good, very powerful coverage map tool. So this is a tool that you can use for indoor coverage and outdoor coverage, and you can put plans on, you can advise the system what the various walls are made out of, you can advise the system which access points you're going to use, areas you don't want Wi-Fi, areas you do want Wi-Fi, and it will actually go ahead and draw you extremely reliable and truthful coverage maps of the Wi-Fi. It's an excellent tool. It's only come out early 2018, but it is very, very good. And if you want to do a proper coverage map, it's worth actually going around with playing with that. But this produces nice, pretty pictures, you know, so whatever. So let's just save that. We'll save that. There we go. So that's saved now. So next time we come back in again, it will automatically show us these two access points showing this fantastic coverage of this floor. So let's go through the next tool. Let's look at information we can get about connected clients. So if I click on monitor, we've got active clients. Now, all right, I haven't got any clients connected at the moment. If I had some clients connected, this would actually show you the client name, its IP address, its MAC address, operating system, SSID, band, blah, 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 blah. So, sorry, I haven't got any connected Wi-Fi clients to show you that, so you just have to take my word for it. What you'd see here is a whole series of rows of data of connected clients. If you go look at some of the other videos, I've actually got some screenshots of this showing it with true clients connected. So that's active clients. If we go down to statistics, yet again, we can actually get information, further information about clients. Again, we haven't got any connected clients, so yes, it doesn't really tell you very much, but yet again, there are some screenshots in some other videos. So what it will show is the various access points, and each access point, it would tell you the traffic throughput for the access point, the client count, number of clients connected to that access point, and also we could look at individual client traffic through that access point. I'm sorry, it's a bit boring because I haven't actually got any wires connected clients at the moment. So that's the client monitoring. We've also got AP monitoring. So if I click on access points, now gives you more information about the traffic throughput for the access points. Yet again, the client number and the traffic throughput per access point. I'm sorry, yes, it's a bit boring because I haven't got any connected clients. But hopefully you get the idea. And the final thing I've got on here is this real-time throughput device, which will give us an instantaneous snapshot over the last couple of minutes of the data going through an access point. And I can pick a specific access point, and it will show me the data that's actually going through that access point for any connected clients. And of course I haven't got any connected clients, so guess what? It shows absolutely bugger all data going through that client, through the access point. You get the idea though, you get the idea. So that's AP monitoring. The next thing we can do is we've got a couple of log features we can look at. If I go to monitor, we can go to system log, and we can look at all different settings that we can do for logging. Do we want it enabled or disabled? Do we want the logging to actually be stored in the flash of the device or the memory device? Obviously, if you store in the flash device, then it's there on a power reboot. If it's in the memory, then as soon as you reboot the device or power off the device, then you lose that logging. Do we want to set up any form of remote logging? So this is basically using a syslog type service, and we can actually click on add, and we can put in details of the IP address of the logging server, port it wants to work on, and we can actually enable or disable certain types of log information messages that we actually send to the server. I won't set up any on that time being. And under event logs, this is actually now showing you the log, the internal log, and this is showing, as you say, I mentioned earlier on, you can actually decide whether you want the log stored in the RAM or the flash. At the moment, defaulting in the RAM, and by default it's saying, do you want it to show all the log entries or specific ones just for the controller, the switch, or the wireless client? So it's showing them all at the moment, and as you can see, a bit boring accent, bit boring logs. But key one there is, look, you can see my PC logging in and connecting to it. The date time's wrong, obviously, because I haven't set the date time actually on the controller yet. Perhaps I should have put that at the beginning of the actual video. Right, final thing in this particular section of the things I want to cover is the email alert log. So what this is this is the facility whereby an administrator can get alerts emailed to them on specific events occurring. So the first stage is you enable you put in details of the SMTP server and the from address and the to address that you're actually going to use for the emailing, and set up any form of authentication or SSL on the actual email server negotiation. I won't bother showing that, but I will show you this event binding, which is basically what this does is it tells you or allows you to configure and tick which types of events you actually want to be included in these emails. So do you want system status, SSL changes, device management, device status, blah, blah, blah. So if I tick any of these, what it basically means is that these particular types of events will be emailed according to the email alert settings that I showed you on this screen. Right, so what's next? Let's go back to device management. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is quickly go through the guest network setup. As I've mentioned on previous videos, as far as I'm concerned, the guest network setup on this device is quite primitive, quite basic. If you wanted a proper guest portal service, I would say go get a proper guest portal gateway device, similar to some of the guest internet ones that we sell, which will actually allow you to do things like social media logging in, PayPal charging if you want to, lots of nice, sexy, flashy, customized login pages, etc., etc. So it has got a guest portal logging service actually built into the controller, but it is a little bit on the simple side. So what I'm going to do is go to I'm going to go to the group, and I'm going to click on that button there, and I'm going to click on Advanced Settings. Now, under Advanced Settings, if we go down to the bottom, there's this thing called Guest Network. Now, there are two guest networks. Basically, these are guest SSIDs. There's one for the 2.4, one for the 5 gig. And by default, they're disabled, and I can click on any of them and enable the guest SSID, and I can set up any form of Wi-Fi security I want on that. I don't know, test. How about test? I don't want to be too imaginative. So set up test, and I click on save, and it's now saying, okay, you've gone along and you have enabled a 2.4 gig guest network. Now further down, and we could do the same for the 5 gig if you want to as well. So further down, we've got the next option down on this guest network section is captive portal. That basically means is, do you want it, when they try to connect to this network, do you want to pop it up with some sort of login screen or some sort of splash and go screen? So by default, I shall enable that at this stage. And the final thing here is some IP settings. So the way the guest network works is each access point is acting as a little mini Wi-Fi router. And as a mini Wi-Fi router, it needs an IP address for that Wi-Fi router and some DHC settings to actually dish out to the connected clients. These are clients that are connecting to the guest network. So what that means is that each access point is its own little mini Wi-Fi router with its own collection of routed clients. Now, the advantage of actually having each access point as its own little private individual Wi-Fi router is you've got a high degree of security and isolation. So clients that are actually connected to one of these guest SSIDs can't see clients connected to any other guest SSID, and it can't see clients that are on the network as a whole. All they can do is see the internet, see the router for their internet connection to the outside world. So gives you good isolation for the clients. Small issue though is because the clients are actually set behind a little mini Wi-Fi routers, the clients can't easily roam between the access points and still stay on the guest network. What will happen is, as they leave the guest network that they've already logged into, let's say on the first access point, I'll have to go through a renegotiation with the second access point. So it's a little bit inflexible, but it's okay, I suppose, for a splash and go type of situation. I'm just going to apply those changes I've done there. Blah blah blah. So it's now applying those changes. So it's now applying that change I did, enabling that guest network and enabling the captive portal. So what we'll do now is we'll go down and actually look at the captive portal page itself. So that's under hotspot service, captive portal. So the captive portal has three basic operation modes. Splash and go, which is, it just pops up with a page saying, I don't know, things like, hey, this is welcome to Joe Blog CAF. Please tick the box below to confirm you agree to our T&Cs. It doesn't do anything other than that. It doesn't do any fancy logging or any form of authorization or any social media type account or anything like that. All it does is a splash and go page. You can also do a local user database and an external radius server, so you can actually use lists of username and passwords. But it's so simple and so basic, I wouldn't bother. It's fine as far as I'm concerned as splash and go. Anything more sophisticated, my advice is go get a proper hotspot gateway to add to the network. Anyway, splash and go is the default option. Another splash and go, you've got a few tools to configure the login page. You could, if you want, put your own login page in. But yet again, not really worth the effort. So you can just click on here. You can select your own logo to pop up. Put your own custom message in, and enable whether you want some T's and C's to show. And you can edit the T's and C's if you want. What else we've got down here? What to do after they've actually gone through this screen. So do you want them to go carry on to the original website they were trying to visit, or redirect it to your own website? For example, Joe Blogg's Cafe might have a list of special offers in pasties or sausage rolls or bacon sarnies today, something like that. And at the bottom we've got default timeouts. Do you want an activity to time out, let's say, after 30 minutes, or even just limit total connection time, for example, to 30 minutes or 2 hours or whatever you want to put in. So that is the captive portal. As I say, it's a little bit simple. It hasn't got anything flashy like social media logging or PayPal or any form of charging options, that sort of thing. So that's the captive portal, and now what we can do is go on looking at a final run-up of features and functions on my list. So this is just some random things that I couldn't really find out what sort of what to bracket them under. So the first thing is saving your configuration. It's going to be amazing the number of people who go through all this effort, might spend an hour configuring the unit and never actually bother doing any backup configuration. So click on backup, and we can backup and restore. And can we backup restore either the switch functions, the controller functions, that's the Wi-Fi management side of the actual system, or both. I'll just click on both, and if I click on apply, so we've got backup ticked here, click on apply, and we can go through and put a file in to save, and I won't bother actually. I don't really care what name it gives it all. So now we've done a backup, and so that's backup, and by restore we just do a similar thing, and we browse and find a file and click on apply, and it brings the configuration back in. So fairly self-explanatory, no rocket science there. Let's look under what else can we show? There must be something more exciting I can show here. Trying to think of something else I can show you. Let's look at scheduled tasks. Let's look at scheduled tasks, because these are quite good, these scheduled tasks. If I click on scheduled tasks, that's the next thing down the maintenance. That's the first thing in the maintenance list, to be honest, so it's probably worth doing that. Let's go. Scheduled tasks. By default, obviously, out of the box, there are no scheduled tasks. If I click on add, now we can see a list of options that we can do. So what these are tasks or events that we want to happen at certain times of the day, certain days of the week, that sort of thing. And we've got a whole range of different tasks that we can do, we can create. And as you can see here, the options are we can reboot APs, change the WLAN state. Well, what that basically means is turn an SSID on or off. We can change the PoE state, which basically means through the PoE switch. Obviously this only applies if you're using the EnGenius product, but through the EnGenius PoE switch, if we do change PoE switch, we can actually instruct the PoE switch to turn the power off to an AP or the power back on again at certain times of day. And we can either do and we can do the other option we've got down here is we can actually quickly blip the PoE to do an actual reset or reboot of the access points. So the way you do is you put a task name in here, you select your task, you select the access points, copy them across here to the members list. So these will be the ones that will be affected by this scheduled task. And down at the bottom here, we can select the days of the week and the hour that we actually want those events to occur. And we can even, for example, say do it, I don't know, every 2 months or something like that. So we can actually use it's quite flexible scheduled task. It's a nice little function, but it does enable you to do things. For example, you may want to turn off access points out of office hours, or turn off specific SSIDs out of office hours, that sort of thing. So you've got the functionality to do that sort of thing there. What else we've got on my random list here? Monitoring. Right, rogue AP detection. So what this is as part of that background scanning that the access points are busy doing on, they're also having a look around to see what other access points they can actually pick up. So what it does is it then produces a list. If you've got a rogue AP detection, you can see we've got a list here of other access points that it's seen. And obviously some of these are ones in our own building, some of these are outside our building. For example, I don't know what Zyx or blah 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 is, and sit in a group and that sort of thing must be our neighbours or something like that. But anyway, what it does is it tells you the MAC address, the SSID, the channel they're broadcasting on, the mode that they're running, band, security, and it also tells you which of the access points detected this rogue signal. So it tells you which access point detected it and what the signal strength was that it detected of that rogue access point. So that's rogue AP detection. What else we've got down here? So we can do, if we go down to access points, we can do rebooting of specific access points. So if I click there and click on that, we can actually reboot the access points. So that's a manual rebooting of the access points. I'm not going to bother doing that now because I don't want to. Right, and firmware updating. If we go under maintenance, we've got this thing, we've got various tools for doing firmware updates. We've got bulk update, which is a method whereby you can manually upload a firmware file to the controller and then manually apply that firmware file to a list of access points. Okay, you'd use this method. Normally you'd go through that automatic method that I've already previously shown, but sometimes you may have an issue with the firmware automatically happening. For example, you might not have any internet access for a start. The controller might not be able to see the internet. There may be some sort of firewall policy going on whereby the controller can't see the internet. So under those circumstances, you can't rely upon the automatic update. You have to go through and actually manually do it. So this is just a manual way of you uploading a firmware file to the access points without going through the automatic procedure. We've got the automatic firmware update system. So normally what actually happens is it will actually come up with a little icon here with a little red indicator for any firmware updates that are available. But if we go to the one-click update, click on update list. So update list gives you the option of it gives you some history of what it's recently done as far as that is concerned, and also allow you to do a manual check for updates. So tick that button, that will just go off and check to see if there's any manual updates. And obviously I've just done updates for all these, so there are no updates available. The other thing we can look at under the one-click update is the update setting, and that just enables you to either enable or disable the automatic, and also enables you to tell it where you want it to go for the updates. Now the default obviously is the EnGenius server, which almost certainly is the EnGenius server located at EnGenius HQ in Singapore. But it does allow you the option here to put in your own updates, your own FTP update server if you wanted to. I don't know of anybody who does that. Everybody I know does it through the EnGenius server, but the option's there if you want to go through it. So what else have I got on here? The only other thing I've got on here is troubleshooting. So we can actually click on any particular access point and we can click on here, and it will just go through for that particular access point. It will just go through and see if there's any issues with the connectivity and the traffic going through to that access point. So I just randomly picked one. I picked the 860 off the top of my head and clicked on that, and it's gone through and said, well, we haven't found any problems with the connection, both at the traffic layer and at the physical layer talking to the access point. So that's troubleshooting. Obviously, if there were any issues, you'd end up with some crosses and some warnings. So, you know, it might come up and say, well, there's a cable connection to this access point, but it's not working. So you've got the tools there to do some form of troubleshooting. So there are loads of other things I could actually go through, because you know, I've got, but I think that's probably enough for this video. On further videos, I'll actually go through and talk about the Easy Master system, and also go through things like the mesh configuration and setting up. But at this stage, I think that's enough. Thank you very much.